everybody. My name is Erica Anderson, and I'm the Land Conservation Liaison with Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, sorry. I'm the Land Conservation Liaison with Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a new project that we've been working on that we're calling the Privateland Legacy Partnership. So before I jump into the project itself, I figured I'd give a little bit of background information about who UINR is in case anybody isn't already familiar with us. So we're Unama'ki's Mi'kmaq voice on natural resources and the environment. We're responsible for many things, but we look after aquatic research and stewardship, species management, traditional Mi'kmaq knowledge, conserved and protected areas, sustainable forestry, water quality monitoring, and environmental partnerships. And by integrating Netaglimp, which is traditional Mi'kmaq management, with Etowoptimunk, which you may be familiar with, it's also known as two-eyed seeing, we take the lead on best management practices in Unama'ki. We work closely with government and First Nations organizations towards equal participation in natural resource management. We represent the 5 Mi'kmaq communities in Unama'ki as well. Our board of directors is made up of the 5 chiefs, and we were established in 1999. So jumping right into the project, as caretakers of the land, we recognize that the forests, rivers, and wildlife that are here today are not just ours. They are a gift that we hold in trust for future generations. So our project, which I don't yet know how to pronounce the Mi'kmaq name, but it roughly translates to "we are leaving it for future generations," offers free biodiversity assessments for private landowners. So these assessments will help to identify important habitats and biodiversity on your property. And based on the results, we will share recommended conservation actions that align with your vision for the land, ensuring that it remains healthy and thriving for generations to come. So a little bit on the why behind this project. As we all know, most of the land here in Unama'ki and mainland Nova Scotia is privately owned. That includes about 85% of coastlines. And so that kind of makes it difficult to monitor for species at risk and biodiversity on private land because typically there's just a lack of relationships with private landowners and organizations like ours. So we're trying to bridge that gap and build those relationships with landowners within Unama'ki. So why participate in the project? It's a great way to get to know your land a little bit better, to learn about what species do live on the land, or what could live on your land. It's a great way to honor nature, learn about ecosystems and natural features that sustain life, to protect significant species, and preserve wildlife that is native to Unama'ki, as well as to join a movement of caretakers, and to help keep the land and water healthy for future generations. So, we are prepared to conduct a number of surveys on private land. And our surveys typically take 1 to 2 days, depending on the size of the property, might take a little bit longer. And our team generally consists of wildlife biologists, our earth keepers, foresters, and just any individuals really who have expertise, knowledge when it comes to species identification. So we go out, we schedule a day a day or two, I guess, to walk your property, and we basically conduct what we kind of call a mini BioBlitz. So if you've ever participated in one of those, you're just walking around and identifying as many things as you possibly can. So that's kind of what we do, and it can be really fun. So we're prepared to conduct riparian and wetland surveys, forest surveys, agricultural land, as well as flowering plant surveys. And the species that we expect to find in those habitats, there's a little bit of overlap. But we're prepared to conduct wood turtle and snapping turtle surveys, monitor for bats, birds, monarch butterflies and milkweed, large mammals, moths, snakes and salamanders, and lichens. And when we're doing our monitoring for mammals, we're installing trail cameras on the property in areas where we see evidence of activity, so tracks, trails, things like that. And then for the birds and bats, we install autonomous recording units, or ARUs, which I think Brian spoke a little bit about in the last presentation. So we typically try to leave those up for about a week, and then we return to the property, collect those pieces of equipment, compile all of our data, and all of that goes into the final assessment report that we give to the landowner. So there's lots of things that we do include in the report. We give a general summary of findings. So we'll say, you know, how many bird species we identified, how many different types of ground vegetation, things like that. Any notable species as well. So that could be species at risk, it could be invasive species, kind of anything within that realm. We also share information about culturally significant species that are identified on the property and what makes them culturally significant. We try to provide as much background information on that as we can. Any key ecological features and their significance. We also provide species-specific steward recommendations and resources, as well as land protection options, which I'll talk a little bit more about after. Then we also give a really detailed full summary of all of the species that were identified on the property, as well as their specific locations. Any cool trail camera photos that we record or collect during our surveys as well, we try to include those in the report. And then we also include the map that we used during the survey. So it's just an aerial image, and we upload it into Avenza, collect all of our data in there, and when we provide that to the landowner, if they don't already have Avenza downloaded on their phone, they can upload that map, and they can go and check out any observations that they might be interested in that we had found. And I'll also provide an example of what that kind of looks like too. So for the stewardship recommendations and actions, there's a number of things that we might recommend, such as species-specific habitat enhancements, conservation easements, incentives for increased buffer zones to exceed the provincial standard, as well as land securement options. So that could be donation or purchasing. And this is the map example. So as I mentioned before, we usually use aerial imagery just for privacy purposes, as this is a property that we included in our pilot phase of the project last year. We just switched up the base map a little bit to make it more or less identifiable, I guess. But it was located in Inverness County, and it's very colorful, looks a little bit chaotic, but all of those pins represent different observations that we had made on the property. So for this particular property, there was lots of things going on. We identified different types of berries, birds. There were lots of cavity trees and burls. There was some clay that we found on the property. We also make a point to note any evidence of human impacts, or garbage dump sites, things like that we might find on the property. Different types of ground vegetation, insects. We did find one invasive species on this property as well. Any lichens and fungi, mammals, dens, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and culturally significant trees. So for example, white birch or ash. And that's it. So I'd like to thank our partners. Malcolm Fennick couldn't be here today, but he is the program manager for the Malimugi Umsikogumana program here at UINR. Tristan Simon is our protected areas manager, and he is here today at the back there. And then I'd also like to take a minute to thank Megan McGinnis, the field manager with Cape Breton Privateland Partnership, that was signing everybody in as you came in. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. Hopefully Tristan can help me out with that as well if we have some time. Otherwise, we'll be around, so you can feel free to come and find us as well.
Any question?